All right, I see it's 7 o'clock. Is there anything else that we need to wait for before I get us kicked off?
Kate, it's Dan Reesig. I just want to make sure that Tom in the control room is all good to go for the TV broadcast, and so he can give that signal.
Wonderful.
Give me just a moment here, and I should be good.
I'm in the process of getting our student commissioner on the line too. So go ahead and start, and I'll work on the back end.
Do we have a quorum?
I think we do.
I do see we do. Yes,
Yep.
I see you.
Okay, great, thanks.
I don't even have the green light on the podium to tell me when we're ready, so just let me know when I'm safe to begin.
Yeah, this is Tom. Give me just a moment, trying to find a issue here.
Take your time.
While we're waiting, just a reminder for any commissioners to please be on visual if you're able.
And I'll add on to the reminder to please mute when you're not speaking. And unmute when you do want to speak. That was not geared towards anyone in particular.
Okay, guys, this is Tom, and I have everything recording, and let's go.
Thank you so much, Tom. Welcome to the January 26th, 2022 meeting of the Edina Planning Commission. Due to the surge in local COVID-19 cases, this meeting is being held electronically to ensure the safety of all residents and staff. All members of the commission and staff are participating from their homes or offices. Which is great because I myself have COVID, so love that we're able to still be able to gather. The city is committed to continuing to receive and hear your inputs on matters. We've been collecting public input through voicemail and through our engagement website, bettertogetheredina.org. It's important that you know that all comments that have been submitted have been received and read prior to the start of this meeting. You do not need to submit the same feedback in another way. All feedback is considered equally, regardless of the way in which it was submitted. Tonight, there will be one public hearing. Individuals who want to provide testimony remotely for a public hearing can do so by calling 1-800-374-0221 with conference ID 9088988. And tonight there is no community comment during the meeting. Everyone will be allowed up to 3 minutes to speak. Please give your full name and address. Staff member Liz Olson will let anyone who calls in know if they go over 3 minutes. Remember, you do not need to call in or comment live tonight if you have already provided feedback. Also, please do not repeat the information already presented. Provide testimony if you have new comments or information to bring forward. Thank you in advance for your patience as we work to conduct this meeting online tonight. We hope that there will not be any issues, but be assured that we'll do our best to continue the meeting as best we can if there are any glitches. So thank you everyone for tuning in tonight and for your interest in the Planning Commission and our work in the city. And also another reminder, so when we are remote like this, we have to do a roll call for every vote. So just be aware that that's something that will be happening tonight. So with that, we can do our roll call. I will pass it off to Liz Olson for that.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Strauss?
Here.
Commissioner Olson?
Here.
Commissioner Berube?
Here.
Commissioner Elkire?
Here.
Commissioner Bennett?
Here.
Commissioner Barbaro?
Here.
Chair Agnew?
Here. Thank you. Next up, we have our approval of the meeting agenda.
I move to approve the meeting agenda as submitted.
Second.
I second.
All right, we'll do a roll call vote. Liz?
Commissioner Strauss?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Berube?
Aye.
Commissioner Elkire?
Aye.
Commissioner Bennett?
Aye.
Chair Agnew?
Aye. All right, the meeting agenda is approved for tonight. Next, we will do our approval of the meeting minutes from our last Planning Commission meeting, which was held last year on December 30th. Were there any changes or updates that anyone saw?
I move approval of the minutes.
Second.
All right, seeing no further discussion, Liz, if you could do a roll call or votes.
Certainly. Commissioner Strauss?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Berube?
Aye.
Commissioner Elkire?
Aye.
Commissioner Bennett?
Aye.
Chair Agnew?
Aye. Thank you. The meeting minutes have been approved. All right, next on the agenda, because we do not have community comment when we are meeting remotely like this, we have our public hearings. So the first one tonight is for 4521 Garrison Lane. And I do not, who is with the one presenting this one tonight? Sorry, I don't have that in my notes.
I am Chris Acker.
Perfect, thank you. Take it away.
So I'm going to share my screen. Chair, members of the Planning Commission, request is a variance from pond setback at 4521 Garrison Lane. Subject property is located at 4521 Garrison Lane and is south of Garrison Lane and north of a pond as highlighted. Existing structure is a two-story home with an attached two-car garage built in 1964. The applicant is requesting a 6.6-foot pond setback variance for a porch addition that will replace this existing deck that's behind the home currently. Existing deck has a non-conforming 39.4-foot setback from the ordinary high water elevation of the pond. The applicant is requesting a 6.6-foot variance for an addition of a porch in place of the deck. It actually reduces the setback and nonconformity. The setback will be 43.4 feet. Existing deck is 16 by 20. The proposed porch is 16 by 16. So the encroachment in this area actually will be reduced and will be further from the pond than the existing deck. Neighbor directly to the east, you can see, has a porch, and that is actually 35.6 feet away from the ordinary high water elevation of the pond. So it's not uncommon along the pond that there are some nonconformities. Actually, the green property is the subject property. All of the red highlighted properties have nonconforming setbacks from the pond, which is not surprising. Prior to 1990, the minimum setback from the pond was 25 feet, and then it was amended in the early 90s, requiring a 50-foot setback. So a lot of improvements, including homes, were built prior to the ordinance change. So it's not uncommon to see nonconformities around the pond. With the exception of the setback from the pond, the proposed project meets all the other zoning ordinance requirements. This is a floor plan of the existing deck. It's 16 by 20. It's much deeper than what's being proposed for the replacement with the porch. It's 16 by 16. So again, it'll be further from that pond. This is the west elevation. It will match the materials and the design of the existing structure. Rear elevation and the east elevation. And then a rendering of the back of the house with the new improvement, the porch, and then you can see the adjacent neighbor to the east. Staff supports the request given the following findings: that the proposal meets the variance criteria. The practical difficulty is caused by the existing location of the deck and existing nonconforming setback from the pond. The proposed addition is reasonable and was not self-created. The current house has a nonconforming deck setback from the pond and was built prior to our current setback requirements. Granting the variance will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. The setback will actually improve from the pond with the new porch. Staff does support the request subject to the following conditions: the plans that are date stamped December 15th, 2020 that I've shown to you this evening, and then also the comments and conditions listed in the January 13th, 2022 engineering memo. There were a number of neighbors who supported the request indicated on the Better Together Edina site. And then we do have the applicants, Abby and Marcus Sandrasco, and then Andy Campbell, their designer, present on the call for questions. And with that, I will stop and answer any questions you may have.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions for the city? And please feel free to speak up. I am not able to see everyone.
Okay, Chair Agnew, this is David. I did have a question.
Please go ahead.
Ms. Ockers, the setback requirement in current code is 50 feet, is that right?
Correct.
Okay, and I don't know if this is a answerable question right at the moment or not, but what's the purpose of that 50-foot setback? Is it to protect property or to protect the pond, or what's the general thinking behind that?
It's mandated by the state. So we were required to change the setback. The state DNR has requested back in early 90s, it changed from 25 feet to 50 feet. Some of our lakes actually they jumped to 75 feet. I believe it is, for both of those reasons, to protect the area around water bodies. It's difficult in situations like Edina, where most of the properties were developed many years ago under different ordinance requirements, and a lot of the homes and improvements are much closer. Outstate, it may not be so much of an issue because you don't have as much improvements around some of the water bodies. So it is a challenge, but we can be more restrictive than the state, but we can't be less restrictive. So we have to adopt their requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for the city? All right, hearing none. I would be happy to invite the homeowner or the architect or the homeowners to speak if you have anything. Otherwise, I can also just open it up for questions if any of the commissioners have questions for you. But please, if you would like to say anything, you are welcome to.
Sure. I'm the architect, Andy Campbell. And I'll just say a few words. Thanks for the presentation, Chris. I think that was a great overview of the project. And, our goals here are really just to blend in with the existing house and the neighborhood. So we're trying to design the screen porch structure to fit with the existing house, and to trying to save that existing deck, which is perfectly good to support the new new roof rather than tear that off a perfectly good structure. And then we're trying to make the condition better than it is existing by removing that 4-foot portion of the existing deck. And I'll stay here if you have any other questions. I'll be around. Thanks.
I'm the homeowner. I'm Abby. This is Marcus. And we were really pleasantly surprised by all of the neighbors' support for what we're, hoping to do in the back of the house. And we're looking forward to spending a lot of time out there with our 4 kids and neighborhood functions and things like that. So we would really appreciate your approval.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for joining tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Do any planning commissioners have any questions for either the architect or the homeowners?
I have just a clarification, and this would be for the architect. Thank you for being here. So if I understood correctly, the new enclosed room, if that's what you're calling it, is actually a smaller footprint than the current deck.
Correct. Yeah.
But you're able to use the current deck, so you're just kind of slicing it off. So you're not creating a new floor.
That's right. We're going to remove like 4-foot portion of the existing deck. And then we are going to be putting new helical footings underneath the new posts for the roof. But the floor structure, the rest of the floor structure can stay intact.
Okay, thank you. I just wasn't clear because you mentioned you were keeping the current deck.
Right. Yeah.
Thank you.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Any other questions before we go to our public hearing? All right. Well, thank you for being here. With that, we will open up the public hearing. I think that we'll show the numbers on the screen, but let me pull up my notes to make sure I read it. Those who would like to provide testimony tonight can do so by calling 1-800-374-0221 with conference ID 9088988. Everyone will be allowed up to 3 minutes to speak. Please give your full name and address, and then staff member Liz Olson will let anyone who calls in know if they go over the 3 minutes. And as Chris Ocker mentioned, we did receive a lot of comments online. So, Dan, I think I'm looking to you to let me know if we get any callers or when you think that I should move on.
We do not have any callers right now. We do have that delay, and then especially with going back to the virtual format, I would recommend we wait about a minute or so I can let you know.
Sounds great. Thank you.
So we are just about at the 1 minute mark. We have not received any callers, and it does not appear that there's anyone calling in right now. If for some reason that changes in the next 20 seconds or so, I'll pop back in, but otherwise feel free to move forward.
All right. Thank you. Can we get a motion to close the public hearing?
I move to close the public hearing.
I'll second.
All right. Liz, roll call, please.
Commissioner Strauss?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Berube?
Aye.
Commissioner Elkire?
Aye.
Commissioner Bennett?
Aye.
Chair Agnew?
Aye. Thank you. The public hearing portion is now closed. So with that, I will open it up to any comments from any planning commissioners. Commissioner Strauss.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, the one question I have, and Commissioner Alkire, I believe was kind of the same issue is why were we concerned about having this deck and the dimensions and I mean and the difference from, and I thought Chris did a very good response to it, that sometimes you're handed requirements, in this case the state of Minnesota or whoever, and the idea that you can't be less than what they are. So that was a good, but as I looked at that, I said, well, all we're talking about is some footing in a line, and the fact that sometimes people make requirements for you. So good, that was a good answer. So thank you.
Commissioner Alkire.
Just a few thoughts. Thanks to the applicants for joining us tonight. Looks like a really nice space for you and your family. For me, I'm encouraged that you're improving the setback with the project that you're talking about. I know it can be very hard with our relatively smaller lots in Edina to meet sort of DNR rules. So I think this is a good accommodation and a good project that would support the variance.
I also would second that. I think it's great that you're actually reducing the space, and the deck is already there. I think I would feel differently about this if it were a new addition. I'm not influenced. What doesn't affect my thinking on this is the view that so many other neighbors also are out of compliance. I think if anything, that's a concern. So just because everybody else is doing it is not a reason to do it. But given there's already a deck there and you're actually making less of an impact with this, I would be supportive.
All right. Would anyone else like to offer comments? Otherwise, maybe a motion.
I'd move to approve the setback to open my iPad here, reopen it, at 4521 Garrison Lane, subject to the conditions and findings laid out in the staff memo.
I'd second.
All right. Liz, can we do a roll call, please?
Commissioner Strauss.
Aye.
Commissioner Olson.
Aye.
Commissioner Berube.
Aye.
Commissioner Alkire.
Aye.
Commissioner Bennett.
Aye.
Chair Agnew.
Aye. Well, this has been approved. So thank you so much for coming in, and best of luck. Good luck with your beautiful new space. All right. So next on the agenda, that concludes our public hearings portion. We're now moving on to our reports and recommendations. So the first one we have tonight is a resolution B2202 for the sale of 425 Jefferson Avenue. And with this, I believe we have Affordable Housing Development Manager Stephanie Hawkinson.
Good evening. Thank you for letting me join you this evening. I will share my screen. Hey, is that full screen for you?
It is.
Presentation? Okay, great. So it is a requirement that before the city or HRA sells publicly owned land, that we get the opinion and approval of the Planning Commission that the plans to move forward with this parcel comply with the comprehensive plan. And so that is why I'm coming before you this evening. Is the HRA acquired 425 Jefferson last spring, and we now hope to sell it to the West Hennepin Affordable Housing Land Trust. page down. There we go. This property is located in the northwest corner of the city in a residential neighborhood. It is a single-family house. It's 2 blocks away from 169 and right near the Hopkins border. The HRA acquired this property because it was a problem property. It was abandoned and it was becoming a nuisance to the neighborhood. I have included a couple pictures to show you the state it was in when we acquired it. The resolution that approved the purchase of this property indicated that the HRA was going to buy it with the intent that, if at all feasible, it was going to be sold for affordable housing. So homes, the West Hennepin Affordable Housing Land Trust, Homes Within Reach, is the community land trust that works in Edina. Their vision is to transform people's lives through home ownership. We have been a partner with this organization for well over a decade in providing block grant funds and other funding sources to them in order to be able to acquire homes in Edina, rehab them, select a buyer who has gone through a first-time home buyer training course. They will own the land and enter into a ground lease with the buyer of the house. And so this is able to keep the home affordable for 99 years. So they work with families who are not able to afford to buy a home in Edina through the traditional mechanism. So the land trust process really reduces the cost of the home because the buyers are only paying for the house and not the land on which it rests. So the comprehensive plan says that the City of Edina is committed to aid and secure affordable life cycle housing for a diverse community. Safe, secure, and affordable housing is essential to healthy development of individuals, families, businesses, and communities. So I pulled that right from the comprehensive plan. The Housing Strategy Task Force also supports the creation and advancement of affordable ownership. And I know that you aren't bound by the task force, but this was supported by another body. So that is all I have to share. So our plans are then to, we would have a public hearing at the HRA regarding the sale of this property. But as I stated, it's a requirement that the Planning Commission opines on whether or not the sale of it for affordable housing is in compliance with the comprehensive plan.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? Commissioner Berube.
Yeah. Thank you, Stephanie. Can you tell us when this is if this is set to go to market, how is it marketed? Is it through a traditional realtor? And I'm just wondering how the price is set because it's so unconventional.
Commissioners, the land trust, Walt, will be selling the property. So they will buy it from the HRA, fix it up. Their plan is to rehab it, but there are some concerns. They can't get in behind the walls until they own the property. And so their plan is to rehab it. There is an off chance that they may need a demo and build new, just to be transparent about that. But then they have a long list of people who are interested in buying through their program. So again, those folks have to go through first-time homebuyer training so they understand the issues of budgeting and mortgages and replacing filters on a furnace, which is something that I wish someone had taught me when I first bought a house. And, other things about home ownership. And so they work with these potential buyers, and they have a long list of them. But there's more interested buyers than there are homes. So they work through their list. They look at the buyers on their list, and, it's a queue in a way, first come, first serve. but some homes have 3 bedrooms, some homes have 4 bedrooms. So they also try to right size the house for the applicant. So there's no real estate agent involved.
Commissioner Alkire.
Not so much a question as a comment, just briefly. Wanted to call attention to an article in About Town, which may have just arrived in your mailbox, in which Ms. Hawkins is extensively quoted. I just wanted to mention that one of the things I learned from the article was that in the decade of the 2010s, on average, we built 10 affordable homes per year. And in 2022, our coming year, there's a plan there in construction, in development, are 81 homes. So a big improvement, not all the way up to where we need to be for the comprehensive plan, but I'm hopeful that that's a sign of some momentum in Edina for affordable housing. I want to thank and congratulate Ms. Hawkinson for all her work in that direction.
Thank you, Commissioner Alkire. To kind of echo that sentiment, I personally was able to live in a house that my family owned as a child due to a program like this in Minneapolis. I love seeing this program here in Edina, and I love all the work that you're doing. So thank you for that. Any other questions or comments? Otherwise, I hope that everyone was able to review the resolution and that we could have a motion.
Yeah, I'd make a motion to approve resolution number B22-02, and that it conforms to the general plans for the development and redevelopment of the city, if that's good enough.
I'd second that.
All right. Any further discussion? All right. Seeing none. Liz?
Commissioner Strauss?
Aye.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Commissioner Berube?
Aye.
Commissioner Alkire?
Aye.
Commissioner Bennett?
Aye.
Chair Agnew?
Aye. This resolution has passed.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you for coming tonight. All right, next on our agenda is a review of the sketch plan for 5146 Eden Avenue. And I believe that will be, I don't know who's presenting this one. Carrie, Director Teague, please take it away.
Yes, thank you, Chair Agnew and members of the commission. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yes, we can.
All right, so this is a site you're all familiar with. It's the old Public Works site that's been vacant for a number of years, owned by the Edina Housing and Redevelopment Authority. It's a little over 3 acres in size. It's currently zoned industrial. The zoning went with the old Public Works site. It's guided in the comprehensive plan for a mixed-use center. Maximum density allowed in this area is up to 100 units an acre. It's also, there was the Grandview development framework that was developed a number of years ago, and this site was always targeted as having some type of public use on it, as demonstrated by this graphic that in purple here that shows the land use pattern was to have some type of a public use on the site. There was talk of community buildings. Those have been tested over the years, but nothing so far. So what the proposal is this evening is to construct a 90-unit senior co-op building that would be on the south half of the property, be owner occupied, and 10% of the units would be for affordable housing. The commission may recall, about a year ago, a sketch plan was considered with this same senior co-op use, but it was on the north side of the property. There's also a 2-story restaurant with just under 350 seats, with a 31,000 square foot public green space plaza area, and also a bridge is planned to be constructed by the city over the railroad tracks to connect to the Jerry's parking ramp to the west. This was also an idea that came from the Grandview Development Framework, to create a pedestrian path, essentially from Jerry's ramp all the way across Highway 100 to City Hall, like a pedestrian bridge over the highway. I'll let the applicant go through and the development team go through in a little more detail about the building itself, but just to show a couple of pictures here. What you're seeing now is a rendering of height in the district. The taller building on the right is the existing Jerry's office tower. When we went through that development framework, there was a lot of talk of not wanting buildings to exceed the height of that building. So this graphic demonstrates that this 6-story building would not exceed the height of that existing tower. So this request would require a rezoning away from that industrial zoning to a PUD. Flexibility would be requested to vary from our parking standards, our building height standards. 4 stories is the maximum on this site. A number of setback variances needed, and floor area ratio. And the PUD zoning would be used to ensure the affordable housing on the site. So with all sketch plan reviews, you're not bound by your comments, but to provide some direction on a potential future development request. Areas of focus for your discussion should include discussion about the proposed land uses, the proposed height, the setbacks, and the framework document and guiding principles. So a few of the issues identified, the density that's proposed here is 28 units an acre, so on the lower end. Again, what's allowed by comprehensive plan, it would be up to 100 units on this site. 2 key elements from the Grandview Development Framework are provided here: that bridge connection that I mentioned and the large public, that green space around the restaurant leading to the bridge. The applicant has also addressed the 7 guiding principles from that Grandview district that was included in your packet as well, and I believe they'll touch on some of those as part of their presentation. The Grandview Transportation Plan, another document that was approved a number of years ago. They're proposing sidewalks on both sides of the street, boulevard-style sidewalks. There's also a roundabout planned for the intersection of Eden and Acadia, and they're accommodating that. There's some land needed that we'll see in an upcoming slide that's needed to make that configuration of the roundabout work. In terms of building setbacks, again, as I mentioned, this building is pulled up to the street, so setbacks would be needed. So this graphic demonstrates it a little bit. You can see, maybe this next one. Yeah, so the setback to the corner of the building is 7 feet to the property line. It's about 15 to 20 feet from the curb. Building is angled to the street, so there is varying setbacks here as the building moves along Eden, with the 50-foot setback to the west. Note that the Avador project directly to the west, the setbacks for this project are actually 4 feet to the lot line. So what we're seeing here is a little bit further away from the street from that existing Avador. Some of the reason for that tight setback here was when you, behind the building on the north side, you can see the sidewalk connection here. This is a potential roadway that could connect to the Jerry's parking ramp. So the building was shifted to the south. So it is tight. The proposal here would provide a little more green space. along Acadia, it's a 5-foot setback as well. Again, you can see that the curvature of the street goes into the existing property, which contributes to that tight setback on the site. So there's a brief overview of the project. I can stop there, answer any questions that you may have. With us this evening is Bill Neuendorf, the city's economic development manager, along with Dave Anderson, and they'll introduce the entire development team prior to their presentation. But with that, I can stop there and answer any questions you may have.
Great. Thank you so much, Director Teague. What questions? Oh, Commissioner Berube, jumping right in. I can't hear you yet.
Should all know that by now. You got to unmute yourself. Thank you for the presentation. It's so great to see a potential development for this site. I think we're all ready. I have a question for you. You know, when you go to the Starbucks and you go through the drive-through, I didn't realize until they took that fence away how steep that drop-off is. So it's not really clear. What is the park sort of tiered up to meet that, or is that just going to drop off? How does that work?
Good question. I'm going to share my screen again. Can you see my cursor?
Yes.
Okay.
I thought I could. No, it's...
No, not really.
Yes, there.
If you keep it moving.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here is the area that you're referring to. And you're right, there is a steep drop off here. So there's going to have to be a significant amount of fill that's brought in. And it will be tiered slightly as it moves from the south to the north to that lot line. That's part of the reason you see all the sidewalks not going straight up. They're kind of angled to accommodate that slight rise in elevation as you move to the north of the site.
Okay. Thank you.
This graphic shows it in a little more detail. You can kind of see it as it rises up.
Can I have a follow-up question? May I?
Of course.
Okay. So my follow-up question is, I think that the public area here is great, but how does that work? Who owns that land, and then who owns the land that the restaurant's on, and how does that work?
Yeah, I'm not sure those details have been exactly ironed out. Mr. Neuendorf is, ultimately it's a decision of the city council. Does the city maintain that as a public park and we maintain it? Maybe I'll ask Bill to chime in at this point if he has anything to add in that regard.
Thank you.
Sure, yeah, happy to do that. Commissioners, so if you keep in mind the image that was just up, when we flip-flop the site and put the housing on the south and took the public green space from the southern side to the northern side, it added a lot of complexity to the site. There is a 35-foot drop-off from the Starbucks drive-through down to the bottom. That's a 3-story building. So Carrie had mentioned, yes, there's a lot of fill that will be brought into the site. And while it certainly makes the whole construction much more complex, we think that is the right place to put the public space. We really want that space to serve as the heart of this district as far as a public realm type of space. That was also the approximate location of the original Grandview plan back in 2012. So that location is it would be terraced quite extensively. As we prepared this plan, Carrie mentioned the property is owned by the Edina's Housing and Redevelopment Authority. based on the input that we heard from this group, as well as others last year, we completely rethought the plan again. And the city hired Confluence, or actually not the city, the housing authority hired Confluence Design to work on the landscape architecture. And we started with them first. We also included potential partners, a senior housing partner, as well as a restaurant partner, because we heard both recently as well as historically the desire to have an attraction, a place for the public to go, to eat, to drink, to hang out, to see family, to see friends. So we partnered up with a restaurant operator, or potentially did so. And most of that group is on the phone call here tonight. Happy to answer any questions. But more importantly, I think they're here to listen to your comments and concerns and suggestions. So as far as next steps, we're in the very early stages in the sketch plan concept to see if what we've conceived so far passes muster. And if we get generally good direction, we'll endeavor to prepare contracts with the parties. At this point, we're planning on entering into a sales agreement for the housing with one developer, entering into a sales agreement with a restaurant operator for the restaurant. The city, through the HRA, would retain ownership of the parkland, including all the expenses and maintenance commitments associated with that. And since the HRA is, an ongoing landowner, we're also, in a way, serving as the developer for the land portion of this. So right now, with the restaurant operator, for example, they're not interested in buying a 35-foot deep hole in the ground, but they would be interested in buying a pad that's relatively flat, that's actually buildable. So the HRA, based on this current configuration, we would be involved for a while, but the intention would be to sell those two pieces of land so that those developers could use it to finance their projects. So that's both my intro and a quick response to your answer. Happy to answer any more questions. I'll turn it back to the chair.
Mr. Newendorf, I have one quick clarifying question on what you just said. Does that mean that long-term that the city would retain that park area and that the two plots of land that you were saying in selling would be for the housing and for the restaurant?
Correct. Yep. That's exactly what I intended to say if it didn't come off that way.
I think you said it. I just wanted to double check.
Yeah. So the city would retain the park space, the green space, but we would sell the restaurant pad and the housing pad.
Thank you. Other questions? Commissioner Alkire.
Mr. Teague, just a couple things. I believe we are committed as a city to the bridge already. Is that correct, or am I ahead of the game on that?
That is correct.
Okay,
yep.
So that we can take that as more or less, for the purposes of this conversation, as existing infrastructure funded by the city.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. And then that's great. Second thing, I feel like I should know this, but I don't. Who controls the garage, the parking ramp? Is it the city or Jerry's or some other owner?
That is the city.
Okay. Great.
There's maintenance agreements and things like that, but the city is the owner.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Any further questions?
One thing I might add with the parking, a parking study would be needed. They're really relying on that Jerry's parking ramp to provide the parking for the restaurant. We think there's space available in the ramp, but a parking study would be needed before any formal application is made. So we have a good handle on parking in the area.
Commissioner Berube, did you have another question?
Yeah, so I believe, if I recall correctly, I read this several days ago, So I'm hoping I remember this. I think there's a percentage that's affordable housing.
10% of the units?
10%.
Yep.
Okay, and then the rest would be market rate.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Well, with that then, seeing no other questions for Director Teague, we will hand it over for the presentation from our partners.
I'm happy to begin. Is there a question from Joanne?
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to ask a question, but there's some noise in the background. Just so the bridge, I'm trying to remember where it lands by the parking ramp. Is there going to be like safe pedestrian improvements through that? I think there's sidewalks there, but it just seems like it's kind of, not that well developed. So it's not on this plan. So it's, it's where it lands across. But is that going to be part of a city project too, to make sure that where that pedestrian bridge lands on the west side, that there'll be a safe connection? Yeah, I was trying to look. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, so the plan is to build this entire sidewalk here.
Yeah.
The bridge, and then it would connect to the ramp.
Connect to the ramp. Okay. Okay. All right. I'm probably getting beyond what we can discuss here, but I just looking at the big picture. That was my only question. Thank you.
Commissioner Olson, were you asking about more east of here?
Is it east or would it be west? Where it connects to the ramp. Then those people are going to eventually want to get to, Vernon or 50th.
Oh, okay.
This is becoming kind of a major pedestrian connection. And I know that this is a city project. Bill, you probably have your hand up. Do you have an answer?
Please.
Yeah, there's a little bit, it's a context. I can share my screen if you want to see an image. Okay, let's see, hang on just a minute. So I want to spend a lot of time on this, but I want to be responsive to your questions. Let's see, so I should pull up the PowerPoint. See, am I sharing? Is that working out?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay. All right, so these are schematic engineering drawings. So this is a bird's eye view of the site. So the railroad tracks going north and south, the Grandview Jerry's parking ramp on the left side of your screen, Starbucks building up on the right. So the intention is to provide a better pedestrian and bicycle connection, basically from Hilltop to Walgreens, to provide a safe, attractive, and desirable path for people to walk. Whether you're an employee, whether you're going to a funeral at the funeral home, whether you work at Starbucks, dine at Starbucks, or whatever. So that's why we're connecting point A and point B. This is a bird's eye view looking to the west. So if you're standing on the sidewalk right in front of Hilltop, well, if you're standing on a very high ladder at that point, right now we're building a temporary hill just so that we don't have erosion. It is not intended to be the world's best sledding hill. That hill is being created. Right now, this is the drop-off. So in the fall, you saw dozens and dozens of dump trucks taking loads of dirt to start filling this in. Fairly simple landscaping, but it'd be a double row of trees to create a park-like atmosphere. This is the view if you're actually starting to walk towards the parking garage from Hilltop. So a combination of colorful trees, simple plantings. The idea is to get them established. It takes 2 or 3 seasons, and then try to reduce the maintenance at that point and just let them do what they do best. Closer view of the bridge. The architecture of the bridge is still in flux. We're actually working with an artist to do more decorative panels or decorative design to it. whoops. This is what the bridge looks like if you're standing behind Walgreens. So the city we own the parking garage back there. So in order to have enough clearance to get above the railroad tracks, it's 22 or 23 feet of clearance. This bridge is very high up, but it times out nicely. We can connect the upper level of the parking garage, which is where the handicap parking is. And we've added a convenient stairway to get down to the lower level of the parking garage. And then another offshoot to avoid the parking garage altogether, end up walking towards the Walgreens, the liquor store, the gas station, that corner. We do have a kind of a follow-up plan in the future to do a ramp directly to the north. If you can see where my cursor is. Right now, if you're on a bicycle, you've got to enter the parking garage and then exit. We're hoping in the future we could just not have to go through the parking garage. If we included it, it doubled the cost of this project, and we are at our budget limit the way it is, so we had to design that as a future expansion. This is generally is what it would look like on the west side.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to make sure it was a full picture. Knew it was going to be, but I just thank you for that explanation.
Yep, sure thing. And that's, as I mentioned, is under construction. We should be finished by late summer, early fall.
Okay.
And then Commissioner Barbaro, did I catch you have a question too?
Yes, I had a question on the usage of the park. So I was wondering what your intentions were for how you wanted people to use the park. Is that meant to just be a green space where people can walk? Is it meant to have a playground and be a place to attract children? What are your intentions on that?
That is an awesome question. I wonder if I can table that. We have Terry Minorick with Confluence Design, and he is ready to give you a full overview of the entire site, and I bet he'll have that question answered as well as other ones related to it. Is that acceptable, Chair?
Yeah, I think that's perfect.
Super. Well, let me start from there. And
I think we had one more question before we get to the presentation. Commissioner Berube?
Actually, at some point, I would love to hear how you're going to incorporate the ability for disabled or handicapped people. It's so steep and there's so many stairs. I just want to make sure that gets addressed at some point, but we don't need to do it now. But that would be a question at some point of mine.
We will make sure we cover that in our presentation.
Yes, let's get to the presentation.
Did Commissioner Bennett have a pressing question?
Commissioner Bennett?
Yeah, I do. I'll save probably more of them for later, but I do have maybe a number of questions that kind of get granular regarding process. So obviously, like, here's the destination, we see it. I'm interested in the journey that got us from a year ago to what we're seeing now, since a lot of it's been through HRA decisions and other interactions you guys have had with developers. But before we see what we see, can you explain a little bit of why we're seeing this versus other options? Since, as I look to the framework in previous conversations, there are still some things lacking here that aren't addressed, and it'd be nice to understand why that is.
Sure, I'm happy to cover that in my remarks as well. Great, let me jump in from that point. So as we mentioned, this property is owned by the Edina Housing and Redevelopment Authority. They're a separate agency, but directly related to the city. So our 5 city council members also serve as the decision-making board for the HRA. The HRA's owned the property for about 10 years. The city's owned it since 1962 when it built the public works facility. Before that, it was a cement factory. And before that, it was probably a hill with a field of something growing on it. So the HRA's role is to guide redevelopment. Sometimes that means we provide financing. Sometimes that means we actually take ownership of a property and seek out developers and partners to work with. So they have a much different role than the city council and the planning commission, who are more regulatory in nature. So that's why the HRA tends to work on the front end of projects, get them started, and then it turns into a real project and it goes through the regulatory review process. So with this site, and as several of you know, we've been working on this for more than 10 years. The concept we're presenting tonight is concept number 10 that has been fully explored. Concepts number 1 through 9 failed to be funded, failed to be financed, and failed to win the support of the city council to actually say, yes, do this. So to be frank, I'm hoping number 10 puts us in a point where we can say, yes, let's actually do something good on this site. Over the years, we've studied a number of different things, and for different reasons, they failed to move forward. We studied a 15,000 square foot art center, which, as we talked to more people, said, no, it needs to be bigger. It needs to be bigger. It needs to be bigger. So then it got to 70,000 square feet from 15. The budget back then went from 10 million to 50 million. And we heard it's still not big enough, but it's way too expensive. So we obviously those principles were not aligned. We looked at a potential high rise with townhomes and a smaller art center. That wasn't able to pass muster, and frankly, it couldn't be financed. That one didn't work out. We explored a mixed-use parking garage with Metro Transit. When Metro Transit approved the Southwest Light Rail line, they changed their park and ride strategy. They're no longer interested in a park and ride in this district. They'd much prefer that people in this neighborhood use the Southwest Light Rail. They think it'll be faster to downtown. So when Metro Transit changed their strategy, we lost an essential partner. When the Grandview framework came in place and there's the 7 guiding principles, a lot of them were very forward thinking. They still are. We're doing our best to remain in alignment with them. But one of the key ones was look at barriers and take an obstacle or a barrier and turn it into an opportunity. So before we filled this hole in the ground in, we've explored 9 different ways to possibly turn this obstacle into an opportunity. As recently as last year, we explored a municipal parking garage. We explored storage, underground storage for equipment, for vehicles, for commodities. It's very expensive to build. It's excessively expensive to maintain, and we don't need it. So at this point, we're ready to turn a page and try to get something accomplished and built on the site, which means that we would fill in most of that hole. Last year we presented a concept to you that had housing along with a medical office building and a public green space that would be privately owned but perpetually put in place for public use. And for a number of reasons, this body was not excited by that concept. So that was number 9. We moved on to number 10. So the medical office is out, replaced with a restaurant that would be attractive to the nearby neighbors. We believe it could be very successful in the marketplace. And we stayed with our housing concept. The board of the HRA, as well as myself, are in agreement that the private market is doing a fantastic job of building apartments, rental apartments. There's no shortage of rental apartments in Edina, St. Louis Park, Eden Prairie, Bloomington, Hopkins. But there is a market failure, so to speak, in for sale units, new housing that people can buy. and then sell when they're ready to move on. So we stuck with a housing concept, but we rejiggered the entire site plan to really amplify the public benefit of this park space. So that's how we came about this general combination of uses. We believe it is aligned with the initial framework from 2012, but certainly, it does not create an underground anything. After studying it 9 different times and reaching the same conclusion, we decided it was time to move on and tackle a different strategy. So we have several folks on the line with us tonight. I had mentioned that Terry Manerick from Confluence is here, but first I want to just introduce briefly Dave Anderson. Dave is with the Franchu Companies. Years ago, in concept number 1, 2, 3, and 4, the HRA partnered directly with Franchu to see if they could develop the site in a combination of uses. While those didn't move forward, Franchu amassed an amazing collection of knowledge about what makes this site work and what the constraints are. So when we retooled for this version, the HRA hired Dave and his team basically to serve as brokers for us, to help find a good restaurateur that was up for the opportunity and able to weather the challenges. We've also asked Dave to help manage some of the entitlement process. That's something I'm still a staff of 1 person, so I've got several different projects, and so we needed some assistance in actually managing some of the scheduling and meetings, etc. Dave's on the line tonight by phone, I believe, and Dave was going to just introduce briefly the 2 partners other than the city's park department that we're working with. Dave, do you want to take it from there?
This is Dave Anderson. Thank you, Bill. If you can hear me, Chair Agnew?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Thank you. Good evening. Dave Anderson with Franchu, and nice to be with you this evening. And Bill, thank you for that introduction. And we do have representatives here that will speak to the plan, really the coming together of the plan that we'll have Confluence and Terry Manerick run through here shortly is a collaboration of the participants in the site plan, which is United Properties as the senior cooperative developer, and Alex Hall is here with us tonight, as is the design team members from Pope Associates. And the restaurant operator, which is Jester Concepts, owned by a local Edina resident, Brent Frederick. And Brent has engaged Shea Design. Jordan Brookins has led that team. And what you'll see tonight and what Terry will walk through is really a reflection of the design and the concept planning that has come together through Jester's efforts. So we can speak to that. Unfortunately, Brent and Jordan aren't able to be here this evening, but I think Terry can cover a lot of the specifics and some of the elements in the site plan and design and what's reflected here in the restaurant. And importantly, the Grandview Yard concept. And there's, again, with the 3 components coming together here, this central place and this gathering public green space and element, amenity, really has been the driving force here as this project has come together. So Tom Swenson, Bill, and Chad Milner in the City Engineering Department have been working collectively with the team and through Confluence, as Bill mentioned earlier this evening. So at this point, relative to all of those interworkings of the individual components, Terry will take us through and present the vision of and specific parts of these development components that have come together. So I would, Chair Agnew, just turn it to Terry Manerick here to make that introduction.
Wonderful, thank you. We cannot hear you yet. Mr.
I'm good
Mayor.
now. I hit the unmute. Thank you, Chair Agnew. I'll turn off my video and go to a full screenshot here just to make it easier. But I'll go through the presentation and, feel free to stop me. Probably won't be able to see you as I'm presenting. So if you want to get my attention, say something. But it's a pretty short presentation, but we can go back through it after I've done it to, kind of answer any questions you have. And you should be seeing my screen now. Just confirmation.
Yes, it looks great.
I see you nodding. Okay, great. So I'll do a quick overview of the presentation that we submitted as part of the packet. As Bill said, this has been a site that's been under a variety of different options for development. I think the biggest thing with this plan is it really addresses creating a heart to the district. And I know part of the overall Grandview plan was to create this unified district on both sides of Highway 100. There's been ideas for how that was crossed, how that was joined. But I think as this area continues to develop into the future with the redevelopment of this site and the Avador project as well, this really begins to create that community destination point, whether that be for new residents that'll be part of this community, or whether that be for existing people that work and spend most of their days within this area, whether that be shopping in some form of office building or visiting some of the other retail venues within the area. So this becomes a destination that's not only programmed and functioned during the day and throughout the day, but into the evening as well with the local residents, and then into the weekends with the opportunity for extended programming from the restaurant and activities of the residential population within the area. You can see in context here, this overlay onto a Google Earth image shows you the best relationship of the new design. You can begin to see the Jerry's Foods, the existing parking ramp, existing office tower commercial area, some of the existing commercial that has the Starbucks that everybody's familiar with the drive-through, Hilltop, of course, and the Eden 100 office building and Avador, and then over here off the page, the senior housing and the school to the south. This project also takes into account a restructuring of Acadia Avenue to better address the traffic flow. This restructuring of Acadia actually begins to eat into this property a little bit to gain more area, to create larger lanes of traffic, a turn lane, but also the approach to this roundabout area here that's proposed to kind of help with traffic flow and direct movement through the area. With this, it provides a bend in the road that actually pushes the building to the west, but it also does actually create a tighter connection here, as Carrie Teague was mentioning, but it also is, as a reminder, probably 15 to 20 feet further back than the standard setback of what Arcadia was previously. So, keep in mind, Arcadia came straight down here before, but now with this bend in the road, we're actually not impeding directly on the right-of-way as much as it might seem. The development has 3 different parts. I'll get into those in a little bit more detail as well. But we have the senior co-op, we have the restaurant at Idea, and then the Grandview Yard, which is the heart to the district, and then the pedestrian bridge that was mentioned as well. As part of this, the senior co-op building tries to really respond to the street in the neighborhood as well. It undulates its building form and shape to address the street and invite them to the neighborhood. One thing to keep in mind in this whole concept I'm presenting today is these are just massing blocks that kind of show you the form and shape and the height of these buildings that would accommodate the 90 units as well as the restaurant pad. By no means or way are these defined and carved in stone. We don't have any idea what the materials are right now. We just kind of have an idea of what the boxes are and how they fit into the space as well. There's relationships to the railway. As you know, the railway starts high here on Eden Avenue and then gets lower as it gets to the pedestrian bridge crossing. So we do have some retaining wall components back here as well. The question earlier about the site drop off, as Bill mentioned, almost 30 plus feet of grade change. So you'll see in a section I'll show later that we're building this site up and creating these sets of terraces that provide opportunity for public programming and interaction with the space. And it also begins to address the street as well, whereas before Arcadia kind of just fell into a large pit to what the site was previously. I think that's kind of it for this one. I'll kind of show you a site plan here that shows the relationships. You can see the senior co-op with 2 large wings, a central kind of a community space that has a small amenity deck on top. As you'll see in some of the images, this wing's actually a little bit higher, closer to the railway, just based on the site grading. This one's a little lower, so that allows a walkout from this tower onto an amenity deck. There's a drop-off and an entry plaza for the co-op. We also have an amenity courtyard that addresses Eden Avenue, has a nice south-facing presence as well. We talk about some short-term parking here, some parking access by both Eden Avenue as well as off of Arcadia down this private street into parking access. We provide parking for the restaurant area that has a loop system that can be used for both the co-op and the restaurant. There's some parking here, 25 to 30 cars roughly, but there's also a valet, and that valet provides the opportunity for off-site parking, whether that be in the parking ramp or somewhere else within the district. The restaurant itself has a main building that's 3 stories, 2 above ground, 1 below grade, that has a speakeasy within it. The main level is the main level of the restaurant. The upper level is intended to have a form of party room or event room associated with it as well. It has an outdoor dining component in the plaza space, plus a small events lawn that could be used as part of that as well. And that ties directly into what we're calling the Grandview Yard, which is the public park space. The public park space has a relationship to this. We could see a lot of synergy with programming of events that could happen at the restaurant spilling into the park space as well, or even park space events spilling into the restaurant as well through some form of partnership. We'll show you a section. The one section cuts directly through the building. The other one shows you a line that Arcadia follows to show you the steepness of Arcadia and how that connects. And I'll talk a little bit more about the bridge crossing. As you saw in some of the other images Carrie showed previously, there is a big grade change here. And with that, we have accommodated ADA. The top level of the parking ramp has direct connection to Jerry's Foods and that parking lot through ADA with the pedestrian bridge. And then this circuitous series of paths that we have through here provides a full ADA accessibility to the Grandview Yard area. And it also has a public restroom here as well. This circuitous route also provides some very intimate seating for people to sit within landscaped areas, sit in some shade and kind of view and people watch in the park as well as some terrace seating area both at the top of the plinth of the yard and at the bottom adjacent to the restaurant. It has a very public, inviting, open feel to it. You can see these blue dots as well. I'll talk a little bit more about those, but those are art opportunities within the space as well to maybe build a separate programming for that. As Bill mentioned, the site's divided into 3 separate areas. We have the Grandview Yard Park, we have the restaurant property, and then we have the senior co-op property. So that shows you the approximate scale of the 3 pieces of property that we're talking about for the 3 development opportunities that are here. This is the section. I think Carrie quickly showed this before. You can see some of the heights of Avador behind. We're pretty much at the same altitude and height there. The 5101 office tower is a little bit higher. Jerry's Foods, the parking ramp back in there, the restaurant height, and then the senior co-op. You can see this front level. It's a little deceiving. The front level here would be here, the one on Arcadia, and the back one would be 1 story taller as well. So this line here, this red line, shows the approximate line of the Arcadia Avenue alignment. So you can see the slope at which is at and how it addresses the development. This area that's all shaded in brown shows the existing site grading in relationship to what we're proposing. So you can see that we're proposing a lot of fill go in here. That quick plan that Bill showed a 2-to-1 slope that would happen right about here. We're proposing to extend that to provide more of a usable space for a variety of different programming, not only for Grandview Yard, but for the restaurant and also the north entry to the co-op and the parking lot as well. And then you can see how the co-op responds to that with at grade level parking on this first tower along Arcadia and 2 levels of parking actually on the second tower closer to the railway track that is accessible not only from underneath but also through this access point here. This shot shows you a view from the southeast, looking back towards the parking ramp, the senior co-op, the restaurant, the Starbucks commercial retail opportunity. This is the Eden Avenue building on this side over here as well. But you can begin to see how the new roundabout and roadway alignment of Arcadia ties into Eden Avenue. You can see the buffering that happens in here. There's a nice boulevard, landscape boulevard with a sidewalk separated from the roadway for safe pedestrian movement. ADA accessibility from the parking ramp and the bridge would come across, meander through to get to the Grandview Yard. We'd also have ADA ability to come down the ramp, come down Arcadia to get to the front door. But we're assuming that the restaurant operator would provide most of this parking up here for the ADA accessibility and not have people with ADA needs have to go to the ramp. So that is another opportunity as well. You can see the amenity deck here and how it addresses the south-facing opportunities for solar gain within the district as well. And then also some short-term parking that could be used for move-in, but also for other short-term drop-off activities that may be associated with the co-op as well. And then a relationship to the rail yard and the parking access for the co-op on this side. We'll also be showing some parking along Arcadia. There is some parking allowed along this stretch of Arcadia, so there is a bit of parking on the edge of the park as well. This looks directly north from, let's say we're standing on top of the co-op building. You can begin to see the restaurant. There'd be rooftop mechanical that would be screened and sheltered, so you wouldn't see that. As you can see, the pedestrian bridge here has a retaining wall. We would continue that retaining wall to pick up a lot of this earth berming that we need to get the ADA accessibility into the park. That would tie into the building. The building would become the retaining wall. The lower levels of the speakeasy would be exposed within the rail yard here, and then that would continue along the parking. And then once it reached the co-op, it would actually not have to have a retaining wall at all. As mentioned with the restaurant, this is the primary entry. There's ADA accessibility. It's a slight grade change here just so we could accommodate some of the traffic movement onto Arcadia. But there's an ADA access. There's also a restaurant valet here. So people would come, greet the valet, drop off their car, and then the valet would go park it and then bring back when needed. And then that's screening a service area as well. That'll be kind of some back of house for loading as well as garbage garbage and waste disposal along the railway tracks. The outdoor plaza would have a paving pattern with outdoor seating and dining, fire pits, a variety of opportunities here, some examples. The entrance to the speakeasy actually happens underneath here as well. There's a stairwell that goes down and enters into the speakeasy, getting some daylighting in there. The event lawn is at the same grade as the restaurant pad. And as you can see, because of the grade change in Arcadia, we have to step up the park with some retaining wall components and features, but then also a slope lawn that comes from the park and Grandview Yard and slopes down to the restaurant outdoor space as well, with a seating wall at the bottom and then terrace seating at the top as well. We have two means of access: the main access to the pedestrian bridge, a secondary access that leads you right into the main flat yard area. This is approximately, I think, about 120 feet by 40 to 50 feet across, so it's a pretty generous space. We're thinking programming such as music in the park. You could have small festivals here. You could do a variety of different activities that would be programmed around, possible relationships with the restaurant or just with the overall district and bringing the community together as well. There's a small kind of decomposed granite seating area here as well, and then direct access to this public restroom. The nice thing about this public restroom is it ties directly to the building, so we can utilize the existing plumbing within the building to make that more economical and affordable. And then there's a stair access here as well. We talked about some possible connection to the building, but we think the restaurateur would like to control the access in this point as well. The darker green area here is more of a naturalized landscape that provides the buffering from the railway line, also screens the parking ramp, but provides a nice area for almost like a wooded park seating space as part of that ADA accessibility. And then here you can begin to see some of those art opportunities throughout the park, as we mentioned earlier. This is a shot looking directly south, so you see the synergy between the Grandview Yard, the restaurant area, the parking area, that loop drive drop-off that goes to the co-op entry plaza as well, and the main entry to the building on the north side, and then the senior co-op's relationship to the site as well. This is looking to the northwest, so it's primarily focusing on the Grandview Yard area. Here you begin to see that grade change as we come off the pedestrian bridge, meander through the ADA accessible path, or a series of steps that gets you to some terrace seating as well. I know it was mentioned earlier about a playground. We haven't programmed a playground in here. I think that could be a great opportunity. There's a lot of different spaces in here where we could put a small playground if required. We kept it pretty flexible right now, just to provide the opportunity for a variety of different activities and events that can happen here. And then thinking about the demographic that might be in here, but there is opportunity for a variety of different things to happen within this space. Some form of branding along Acadia as well to identify the yard. We think the yard fits well to the fact that it was a maintenance yard, it's a railway, it kind of has a neat connection to it, but it's also the heart of the district too. You can see extensive landscape buffering too from the parking to separate the parking and well-treed parking areas as well. You can see that really well in this shot just to show that it's not going to be a big hard surface area. There's a lot of thought and intention in making it well vegetated and buffered and screened. This is a great shot looking to the southeast. The school would be down in this area here where my hand is, but you can get the bend of Acadia and how that relates to the co-op as well as the restaurateur and the yard space as well. And then this is that last shot that Carrie showed. It shows you the slope of Acadia, but the relationship to the yard, how we began to create these plinths of opportunity for programming. You could set up a series of tents in here. You could bring in food trucks along this road if you wanted. It could be a variety of different activities that could happen in the park. And then the engagement of the Grandview Yard by the sloped lawn down to the restaurant area creates a strong synergy between the activity of uses. When we build park spaces, we try to create something that people want to come to as a destination. And we always talk about programming, and who's going to do that. I think the relationship to a fact that you have a food service, that people can grab food and go sit in the park or sit outside, or the fact that this restaurateur could program activities within the park really becomes an exciting opportunity for what this public space can be for the city of Edina in the heart of Grandview District. So that's it. Any questions?
Thank you so much. That was a great presentation. Let's start with questions before we get into comments. And so given that I can't see anyone on the screen, if any commissioners have questions, please feel free to jump in.
And let me know if you want me to pull this down, but I'm guessing the questions are going to be about what I'm showing. So
this is David Alkire. I'll start with a couple about parking. Thanks for the presentation. The images are really good and clear. I get a sense of what your thinking is. Maybe I missed it, but I didn't see visitor parking for the residences. Is that underground also?
There is internal parking as part of this tower along the railway line, but there's also 4 or 5 spots here for temporary quick parking. But the intent is that visitors would be in this portion of the parking ramp internally.
Okay. So it's inside the building for the most part.
Yeah.
And then I know we haven't done a parking study. That's something in the future, but I guess one of my first reactions to the images was, why does the restaurant need so many square feet of parking spaces when it's very close to a large parking ramp? And I realize there's a railroad track in between, but if there's a bridge, it's not a tremendously long walk from the ramp to the restaurant. So what's the rationale behind the size of the parking lot?
I think, and I can answer that, Bill, if you want, but I think the main story behind that is that when you operate a revenue generating facility that needs, people to come there and, purchase the food and spend time in the building, they want to park as close as possible, right? So we tried to provide as much parking as possible on the site without making it feel like a giant parking lot. We also do think some of that parking during daily use, let's say if the restaurant's not necessarily active in the morning use, that could be used for actually Grandview Yard parking as part of that process as well. We know that some of the earlier concepts that was requested, that there is some adjacent parking to the development so that people can get to the yard or get to the public public space, but also the restaurant. And then immediately it answers that quick ADA or elderly access type parking to be adjacent to the building. It's not many stalls. Like I said, it's maybe somewhere around 25 to 30 if we push the parking limit. But in the grand scheme of things, the restaurateur is looking at the valet component to supplement the rest of the seating in the venue.
And let me chime in there as well, Terry. Yeah, we've had many team conversations about parking. Commissioner, we heard your comments last year loud and clear on that one. So we've skinnied up the on-site parking as much as possible, and still allow the restaurateur to have a chance of getting financing and to have a chance of making that impression with his customers. The type of restaurant we're looking at here is it's intentional, right? That the HRA was not interested in a fast food drive-through franchise. We weren't interested in a fast casual, grab a burrito and hit the road kind of concept. We wanted more of a full-service restaurant where families, where groups of friends feel comfortable going and sitting down. We've also, working with Jester Concepts, they're excited about the opportunities or the possibilities of having a second floor where they could do events, anniversary parties, work meetings, those types of things. So that there's, I think we're right at the threshold of where they're comfortable. Terry had mentioned the ADA parking spots for the restaurant, and that's critically important. But there's also some of those mundane things, like the garbage truck. The garbage truck can't park on the street and haul dumpsters a block down the driveway. The food delivery service can't park in the street and block traffic because people waiting to get in line at Starbucks are already blocking traffic. Something we hope to improve in the future. So whether it's food deliveries, the beer truck dropping off a keg of beer, all those operational details made it essential that we have a driveway to get all the way to the back. We explored shared parking with the co-op. We explored a single driveway entrance. This is probably the fourth or fifth different version of the surface parking that we've sketched out. And the arrangement we're showing here, we think is the most practical one. But it's also interesting. The restaurateur, most of his existing businesses are in downtown locations. So he has no parking. And downtown, people are willing to park at the Target ramp and walk a block or two, or they're willing to pay $10 to $15 for valet parking. In the suburbs, people aren't as excited to park and walk a block or so to get to their destination. So the restaurateur is committed to some teaser parking in front, valet on a regular ongoing basis, but then also for special events and for employees and others, having the reliance on that existing public parking garage. There's 273 parking stalls in that parking garage. We do have a partial engineering study. When they did traffic counts, they didn't do them in the evening, which is going to be the prime time for the restaurant. So we sent them back. They'll be doing more counts in the evening hours. But typically after 5 or 5:30, that garage is almost empty. So again, that's an intentional decision to work with a restaurateur that won't just do quick service, but will do events where valet parking is a realistic option. And the valet guys will stay in good shape running back and forth between the parking garage and the restaurant. But we think that's a good combination.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both. Just one other question on parking, if you don't mind. Is there a reason that there has to be on-street parking on Acadia?
My recollection is that was the recommendation in our transportation plan from 2016. So we're keeping the on-street parking. We're actually widening the street about 10 feet because there's on-street parking today, but it's very, very narrow. So as the vacant site gets redeveloped, we're going to push that curb. It's 5 or 10 feet to the west to make a more convenient, a more comfortable driving experience. But this roadway is also a designated bike route. So we need a wider road to get cars through there. And our concern was if we eliminate all on-street parking, not only have we upset all of the business neighbors on the other side of the street, but we're creating a condition where people just drive faster because the lanes are wider. And our hope is that with on-street parking, we can use that as a traffic calming feature in this area.
Great, thank you very much.
Any other commissioners with questions?
Chair, could I respond to a question that one of the commissioners, Barbaro, asked earlier? Please. And that was about programming in the park. So Tom Swenson is on the phone call tonight. Tom is with the city's Park and Recreation Department, and he's been an integral member of all these conversations. And as Terry pulls up a slide of the park, Tom, if you're on, if you could comment about some of the programming that could be anticipated, but also some of the programming that just doesn't fit on this kind of site.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. So we looked at the site. It's a little under 3/4 of an acre. So it's, it's a relatively small site. It's nice. We already have 45 parks in Edina. This would be our 46th. This is an area that certainly needs a park. Programming wise, besides the synergy with the businesses in the area, I think we're mostly interested in keeping an open green space, kind of an open palette that Terry put out in the sketch plan. Certainly there would be opportunities for movies in the park and concerts and things that Bill mentioned earlier, but a lot of it would be built around the synergy of the residents and the business owners in the area, as opposed to us building a hockey rink on this site or dedicating any more space on 3/4 of an acre to a dedicated item that, fixes this space for eternity. So I'm interested mostly in keeping it an open green space. Terry's done a great job showing some walking trails for the neighborhood, walking dogs, trees. Obviously, we're trying to increase the tree canopy in Edina and create some green space for the business owners and the residents in this area.
Part of the reason that we rearranged the site was to end up with a sunnier park. If you recall the concept from last year, the taller building was on the north side, and we would have had a shady park pretty much 12 months out of the year. So by rearranging everything, we've got a good shot of having this park being in the warm sunshine most of the year. Some of our HRA members have asked us to consider future opportunities. For example, because right now, frankly, this is not in our budget, but they asked us to consider, what about an opportunity if in the future we want to do a gazebo, or maybe there's a dog run, or maybe there's a little amphitheater, or maybe there's places for public art. So Terry's group has kept some of those types of future opportunities in mind. We're trying to jump and get a head start on that. I don't know if it came out in the renderings here, but one thing we're anticipating with the restaurant is to add public toilets. That's something that we have at Centennial Lakes at the pavilion there. And boy, I hear positive reviews about just having a public toilet when you're in a public park. So these would be on the north side of the restaurant. They would open directly to the park. They'd have to be locked and secured at some point during the day. They'd have to make sure they don't freeze in the winter and that type of stuff. But by having some of that infrastructure in place, we think it really opens the door for those future events. So at this point, we did not anticipate a playground, a swing set, a tennis court, a pickleball court, a hockey rink. All those things are possible, but in order to get a big enough surface that's flat, you would just, the northern end would be one giant retaining wall. And we didn't think that was the kind of outdoor park opportunity that people wanted in this area. If they wanted a basketball court or those types of recreational spaces, we have other places that are, in the neighborhoods and in other areas that are already laid out for those sports and activities. But for this area, we thought a more general, just outdoor recreation, a place to hang out, perhaps set up some hammocking stations. But that type of more passive recreation is what we had in mind.
Yeah, I don't think this means necessarily that you couldn't set up some temporary basketball, some temporary pickleball. All things are open when you have a flat space, even ping pong tables, those sorts of things. If you think of Bryant Park in New York, it's a central green space that's, a variety of different programming. They used to have a fashion show there every year. They moved it somewhere else now, but they basically had to replace the lawn after that one every time. But they have ping pong, they have a variety of different events. They have a winter skating loop. They have a winter market there, which this could be a pretty interesting space for too, knowing that you have some adjacent, restaurant that people could go in and get something to eat as well after they tour the market. But there's a variety of different programming that can happen when you have the flexibility of space that Tom's been talking about.
I have a question that's specific to the senior co-op housing. What is the, and I'm just curious here, the business logic behind dedicated senior housing as opposed to just a more open co-op housing?
Alex, can you respond to
that? Sure. Well, I can respond to the senior housing portion. That is what my group at United Properties specializes in. So we have three product types: the senior housing, which is our for sale housing community, and that's a HUD insured. So HUD insures a 40-year mortgage, which helps keep costs down because the rate is typically lower than a market rate, and the 40 years certainly helps keep that price down as well. So that's our for sale, and then of course we do a typical assisted living, and then a 55 plus rental. If this was just a for sale market rate, essentially it would be a condominium. It'd no longer be a co-op, because the co-op model is restricted to 62 and over, and so by the nature of that, HUD is not interested in a cooperative model that would be open to all ages, and so that kind of forces that issue. I think the other thing is it certainly addresses, thinking back to our meeting about a year ago when we were talking a little bit about that 2020 Edina Housing Strategy Task Report, that identified, I think it was over 75% of housing demand in Edina over the next 5 years would be for age-restricted, senior housing. And as Bill mentioned, you see so much rental product right now that this kind of for sale option is kind of another arrow in the quiver of providing some options to the Edina residents. So I hope that answers that question.
And I'll supplement that as well. So last year, this commission was not favorable to senior housing on the site. We heard that. The HRA heard that. Staff heard it. Developers heard it. Architects heard it. But when the HRA board sat down and considered, future outcomes for this property, frankly, it was more important to them to have a for sale product rather than rental apartments. Rental apartments typically would be smaller. You'd have many more units. The parking demand would be wholly different. And that we felt really changed the whole characteristic of the site. And so that was one of the concessions that I think the HRA was willing to make. If in order to get a cooperative housing where people can buy them, if that meant that the only loan that's available is for seniors, they felt that was an acceptable concession.
You know, I'd also add that, you know, when we say senior housing, a lot of people are thinking, a lot of people do think in terms of 80 plus, you know, housing with services, and that is not what the senior co-op is. It's the average age is 70 years old. We have people that are certainly still working. They're very active adults who are looking to engage and energize the you know, the surrounding retail and the rest of the community, and they're looking for bike trails. They're looking for all those opportunities. So they would certainly, I think, integrate very well into this plan as far as the park and the restaurant and all those possible opportunities offer.
Okay, so if I'm understanding correctly, it's really the funding model of it just not being economically feasible to still do like condominiums. So Bill, hearing your point there of not wanting rental, but in order to make it work with the site that we have, it does need that HUD support, which requires the senior focused co-op model.
That's a great summary.
Thank you. I do also want to ask a question about parking. A sketch plan wouldn't be complete if I didn't. Will the stalls be sold separately from the units, or are those expected to be bundled?
No, each resident gets one stall, and then if there are excess stalls above what we determine we need for guests and visitors, then those are oftentimes available for sale. Right now, we have a parking ratio of about 1.9 per home. That's the highest ratio that we've done at a co-op to date. But to answer your question, each home does get a parking stall that comes with their unit.
Would you consider unbundling those?
And selling them separately?
Yeah.
We have never done that. I suppose where it could possibly appeal is to someone who doesn't have a car and would not be interested in getting that stall, but that creates potential problems in resale if they were to sell to someone at a future date who does have a car. So I'm not sure what the advantage would be, but we're certainly open to. There's nothing in the there's nothing that would prohibit us from unbundling that. And
I think it is a technique that really can help keep housing costs minimized for people that don't necessitate that. I think especially given the walkability of this area, that people can walk for their groceries and walk for all of their main needs, it could be a really appealing location for people that don't need to drive. So that would be something that I would look into. And then, you know, for resale to that point, there's usually just two separate markets. There's the housing market and then there's the stall market. So something to look into.
Okay. Point taken. Thank you.
I don't have any other questions. Does anyone else have questions? Otherwise, I'm happy to open it up to general comments and feedback.
I have a couple questions.
Go ahead, Commissioner Olson.
So I don't know who this should be directed to, but maybe I'll start with you, Carrie. just talking about the density. So they have, it's 28 units per acre, and this property could go up to 100 units per acre, correct?
That is correct. That's taking the entire site into consideration here.
So that leads into my next question. So are these lots going to be always under like one ownership, or are they going to be divided with separate property ownership? And so like we would just consider the actual density is really under the site for the senior co-op property?
So we were thinking that it would be all under one PUD. It would have separate ownerships, but we can sure take a look at that calculation for the senior co-op for just its site. I think that would still be compliant with the comprehensive plan if we just took that site.
All right. I guess my point is that, you know, that does seem like such a low density for an area that we were, you know, hoping to get a higher density. But then they're also up against the building height requirement. And I guess maybe this is a question for the developer too, or for, I don't know if that was Alex. Just, you know, was there a desire to have more stories, or were you happy with this, you know, amount of units and number of stories?
We're happy with the number of units. That kind of hits right in the sweet spot for us, partly due to the fact that if we went in any higher, we move away from wood frame construction. And now you're looking at steel and concrete, which is going to drive up construction pricing, which is going to drive up the cost of the homes. And you're also going to increase your need for additional parking. And so you're probably looking at an additional, another level of parking as well. The other thing is that being a part of the HUD 213 program is the program that we use that helps fund these co-ops, and they require a 60% pre-sale before we're able to break ground. And as you can imagine, the more units you get, it adds many months of marketing and trying to sell additional units to hit that 60% pre-sale. And the challenge there is always the folks who sign up early and they're waiting a year saying, hey guys, when are you going to break ground? And so we try to balance all of those concerns.
Okay, great. Good, thank you.
Other questions, please just chime in if you have them.
This is Jimmy.
Go ahead, Jimmy.
Thanks. Yeah, I guess, you know, first off, what I'm looking at right here is, I mean, it's a great plan. There's a lot of, you know, solid components to it based off of, you know, what was requested for the team to provide. However, you know, being intimately involved with this site and this process and this project for 10 years, right? I still have huge dreams for this site, and there's still some key components that aren't really addressed adequately. And I feel like, you know, as a community, we'd be, you know, at a loss without really trying to get them incorporated more. And so that's kind of why I have a lot of questions related to the process that I don't think were adequately addressed. So I guess rewinding as to how we got here specifically, maybe going through each component of the site, kind of like Kate mentioned about the senior co-op versus a co-op versus other things. I mean, you know, one question I have is, and maybe it's for the HRA, but if we do own this site, I mean, this does seem like a prime opportunity for affordable housing. I mean, prime location. So that and how the framework really calls for a variety of housing options. So there were some proposals that we saw that had multiple things offered, specifically, you know, townhomes that step down Acadia with different housing types offered to provide that variety and diversity. So, Bill, could you help me understand better why it's strictly a senior co-op, and were those other options explored, and why they were not selected?
Sure. And at this point, I mean, this design is the concept. It's not, it's not even to the schematic phase yet. So, but why senior housing or why senior co-op? Alex Hall is with us. He's with United Properties, and he had mentioned that HUD financing is pretty much limited to the senior model for co-ops. We did inquire to other co-op providers, and they also focus on seniors. We inquired to condominium developers, and they are few and far between. There's very few condos that are being built today. The HRA was frankly just not interested in selling to a super high density apartment just for the sake of adding more apartments when there's plenty of apartments for rent in the area. So this doesn't sound glamorous to Alex, but the HRA board felt that was the best fit. We've explored townhomes, we've explored high rises, we've explored mid rises, and each one of those explorations ended with no ability to move forward. I think the HRA board, like many people, are growing fatigued with exploring every possible option, and instead want to pursue an option that can actually get funded and be built and make a positive contribution to the city. So in essence, that's how we ended up with the senior co-op on the site. We did also consider all affordable housing, mixed affordable housing. That was discussed a few years ago. And I don't know the rationale of what was in the folks, in the board members, in their thoughts when they voted, but that was not of interest to them. They wanted to pursue something that was more market driven and for sale. But that option was presented, discussed, and dismissed a few years ago. And then for the balance of the site, we did consider just a park. We considered, that medical office would have been a winner to the business community, but that was not well received by this group. So we struck that item. And I think the commonality was the restaurant being a place that can be attractive and desirable to the neighbors, to the community. People love the Hilltop. People love going to Jerry's. People love going to Devani's. But in this part of Edina, those are pretty much your options. And so the HRA board, board member Staunton in particular, was very desirous of having a sit-down restaurant where families of all sizes and groups of friends could gather. And if they could gather and overlook a park, or maybe meet at the park before their lunch or dinner, or hang out afterwards, that was even better. So that's how he settled on the restaurant option. And then the park, I think, has been, there's been a commitment to have some kind of public green space here for years. As we try to find the right size of that, the housing is about 1.5 acres. The restaurant is about 3/4 of an acre, and the park is about 3/4 of an acre. And that seems to be a distribution that works for folks. And for those folks not familiar, for example, I live on a house on the east side of Edina, so my lot is 1/4 acre. So this park is basically the size of 3 single-family lots combined. So it's a pretty significant green space. And of course, we always get inquiries. People would love to do public storage here. Those types are like self-storage, those kinds of things. We're just not interested in going down that road. The Grandview framework, really wanted this site to be part of the community, and something like a industrial type use is no longer, that's not what's desired here.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I definitely have some more questions along those lines. Yeah, back to the housing specifically. I never recalled specifically affordable housing. I know we have, a big goal to meet for that. And I mean, I feel like if you were given a lot in a part of a city, like Kate mentioned, this being very walkable, access to transit's huge. It'd be nice to have more than just 9 affordable units used here. So, one of the plans had, 27 townhomes along the side. At least when this comes before the city council, I'd at least like them to address as part of the HRA why they decided to not consider that, or for at least a portion of the site, because it doesn't quite make sense to me since, we own the site, so we have a lot of the costs absorbed into that. Second, and maybe as it relates to the variety of housing, page 18 in the the Grandview framework shows a good image of kind of what Arcadia is like envisioned to look like. And so I think answering Commissioner Elkire's question too, at least from their image and from the transportation study, I was never under the impression that there was a goal to park Arcadia. They were clear about having dedicated bike and dedicated pedestrian pathways up Arcadia. But if you look at page 18 of the framework, you see quite a different experience along Arcadia than what we're seeing here. So, I mean, for instance, if you're walking up the south side of Arcadia on the west side, I mean, there's a 6-story building right next to you. It's not pedestrian, residentially focused or scaled in a way that I think was the goal for this area. Was, again, it's, we have this hope for change, and kind of what I'm seeing here is pretty similar to what other things are around town. Big, tall buildings. And yes, there aren't details there, but even if it were staggering that co-op just on the east side, maybe the first story you have units that really follow the topography up and look like separate dwelling units that are much more connected to the street. Like, again, page 18 shows some patios, and also part of the plan was to have kind of big wide steps down Arcadia where it's almost like a plaza feel. Because again, the whole goal of this development is to be a catalyst for the other ones around it, and certainly the east side. So, if we make the west side of it more pedestrian focused, as well as pedestrian scaled, with a big wide, set of steps and kind of like this little parkway look, that will set the expectation for the east side of the street. So I'm not seeing that adequately for Arcadia or the experience along that, especially with the parking. So I certainly would like to see that, tailored for the future, especially how it responds to what certainly will happen across the road. I guess one other question I have, since it was brought up, was about the restaurant. So, and I have to bring this up because it seems like it's the elephant in the room. Pretty much every concept we've seen, one of the biggest parts of the framework is a community commons. And it's referring to a civic or community centered building or set of buildings where people go and do things together, not necessarily sit at a restaurant, but there's actual activities. You mentioned the art center only, because I feel like that was probably one of the few that was explored. But in addition to a restaurant, what was explored in the last year, I guess, aside from a restaurant in concept? And were any community-focused centers or other facilities explored?
That's a good question. So the HRA board directed us to pursue a restaurant. So we follow their direction. In recent years or months, there's been discussion about fire stations. There's been discussions about an art center. There was clarification through the city council that they were getting away from a dedicated new art center. City finances just don't allow for that. And with a fire station, that's desired to be in the northeast quadrant of town. So this area is close, but it's technically on the wrong side of the highway for the fire station. So those types of conversations certainly took place this past year. But when it comes to what to look for, the HRA board that controls the land gave staff clear direction to continue the conversations with United Properties. They felt that was the best combination for the site, and to pursue a restaurant that would complement and interact nicely with the public park. So that's what we have done.
Okay. Yeah, and I tried tuning into HRA meetings, and I know there's some closed door stuff, but there were other concepts mentioned by some of the council members. One in particular was a curling center. The mayor and commissioners or member Sutton visited the Chaska curling center, and I recall him and others, again, compared to a restaurant, which is, it's a way for people to come, and linger, which is what's missing here. But another key aspect, and it keeps arising throughout, basically the foundation of the framework to the surveys we put out there. There's always a desire for some sort of use that allows people to come together to do stuff, not just eat together when you're hungry or thirsty, but to do things. And so I know the curling center specifically was mentioned, so I just wanted to follow up with that of why that concept was it considered, was it explored, and if not, why?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. So last summer, the HRA hired Franchu to reach out to prospective partners, including curling type operations. We helped put together a list of 40 some different operators of restaurants and activities that have kind of a community focus. It's COVID. Restaurants are shut down. Money's tight. Commodity pricing is out of control. So most of those operators either were not interested or they weren't interested on the HRA's time frame. That's what allowed us to really focus with working with Jester Concepts. They not only have a proven track record, they're also local to Edina, so to speak, and they have a similar vision of not just providing food, but really embracing the indoor-outdoor style. And I think most importantly, to what brought us to tonight, they can put this together now, not 5 years from now, not 10 years from now, but they're willing to explore working with us on this time frame. Had we had a curling center operator beating down our door, I think we probably would have had a lot of robust conversations with them, but that just didn't play out. There wasn't interest in that sector.
So that one specifically, the city of Chaska, they operate it themselves. So I guess I'm missing why that wasn't explored. Or again, like a civic center, most of the time the city is operating things, and even some of the meetings went where, do we build the restaurant building and lease it out? So then we can control some of the off-peak hours and other offerings and amenities. So, it's a little disappointing because I'm not really hearing whether or not that was explored in full, because again, as you look at the framework and all these discussions, and part of this is a challenge because between last year and now, there's been no public engagement, and I just hope it doesn't get to the end again, and we're sitting here like we're missing the mark from key component to the site. So like a curling center, I'm not specific to use, but why that could be valuable here is most of them have a restaurant as part of it. You have a big hole in the ground. You can fill it with a structure and cover it with a green roof. I mean, I'm just not seeing the creativity and the innovation that I expect for this type of site. So just fundamentally, I feel like we have some really great pieces. Like the senior co-op is great. I think the restaurant's great. I think the yard is great, but we're still missing something more to draw people in, all ages, all incomes, to do something together. And I think that's what really gets at the framework, and I'm not seeing it. And I'm still not hearing how that was explored or the financing, because I mean, if you look at other cities, specifically Chaska, I mean, that facility is generating a lot of money for the city. So it's not just you're building a storage facility for cars or a parking ramp. So I don't know. I'll add some more comments later, but it kind of gets to the heart of that. And I mean, if you have any other more specifics as to, if certain things were explored, what the finances was or were, I think most of the community would be ready to wait. I mean, we've already waited 10 years. Like, I don't want to rush this to do the wrong thing. So
let me just respond briefly, and then I feel like we might be going in a circle here. So we explored the community center in 2016 extensively. There was not the political will to finance it. It was $50 million plus and growing. There was no financial will to do that. We did speak with the folks in Chaska about their curling center. They do work with a franchise operator, the Crooked Pint Restaurant. They do earn a lot of revenue. It covers their operating expenses. It does not cover the capital it took to build that facility. That's paid for by the general taxpayers. And at this point in time, I don't believe our city council is willing to increase the tax burden to build a structure of that scale and that expense. So that's the short answer to the story. Well, that is the story, quite frankly. But the proposal we have tonight, we're really appreciative of your comments. We hear your concerns. But the team that's on the phone call tonight is not able to, we had our direction, and that's what we're following up on.
Okay. I will ask if there are any other questions. Otherwise, we will open it up for comments. Any other direct questions? All right. If we could stop sharing, I think that would be helpful. And then I do want to open it up for comments. So who wants to go first?
I've got some comments.
Commissioner Berube.
I'll go first. I think there's a lot to like here. I think the senior co-op makes sense. The purchase, the ownership piece of it, and then having at least 10% affordable. I would push that to be more if that is possible. When I first looked at it, my reaction was there. Maybe somewhat similar to what Commissioner Bennett was saying, is that there wasn't that much to draw me into the park. And I think going through and seeing how it isn't just a flat piece of grass, but there's elevation, and you've got the winding pathways, and you've got stairs and places to sit. That's helpful. I also appreciate, I had written down before you mentioned it, that, you know, the outdoor sculptures or some type of art piece, or, you know, maybe incorporating some education pieces would be helpful. And then you mentioned that in your presentation. So I applaud you for that. I think I would just say try and do more of that to make it that much more interesting. I was thinking about the parking and wondering, you know, we didn't talk much. There's not much information on, to us at least, about the parking available to the co-op owners. And I'm wondering if some of those parking spaces, you know, if you've got 1.9 parking spaces per unit, you know, I don't, you know, if they're set up for 2 people, you know, our forecast would be that would be more than enough. And wouldn't it be great if some of those parking spaces could be used for the restaurant and then have some attractive path to covered parking over to the restaurant, and then you wouldn't have to have parking in what, you know, kind of separating the green space. You could have that much more green space. So I guess if we were going to get into it in more detail, that would be something that I would wonder if that could be done, because it seems like doing away with that parking and just increasing the green space as much as possible would be a benefit. And perhaps there's some that could be found in that residence parking. And then we don't see any numbers, right? That's kind of not our job, but it seems it's got to be horrendously expensive to fill in that space and then to build that bridge. And I wonder, you know, when Commissioner Bennett said, you know, couldn't something be built and then you've got a green roof right there where you've got that huge, you know, so you don't have a retaining wall, but it could be useful space and then you've got a green roof. Seems more practical to me. But I guess it's not really in our scope to look at the numbers, unfortunately, because I feel like, you know, we've only got some information, but it seems really expensive for what we're getting. And we don't have the information, so I'd have to leave it at that. But, you know, it's attractive enough and it's useful space, and, you know, it's great to have the green space.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Burby. Commissioner Strauss.
Yes, I guess I have 3 things, and I really liked Commissioner Bennett's overall kind of take on the whole project. He, as usual, hits a lot of things right on the nose. This idea of the view and of how Acadia shapes this project, that east line, the east side of Acadia, I think that's an important part of how this whole project can look and develop. And obviously, my opinion, that those parcels across to the east side of Acadia, you know, are obviously high potential for some future, you know, project. And I think that Acadia is just the center, and I would like to see kind of a full development of both sides of the street, and this idea of parking, I don't see why that may be necessary. The other one, the person from Parks said, this idea of the sunny spot, that really kind of caught my attention. The idea of the north side. There were always a big building was always sort of like all part of the earlier version. Then you're right, it would have. And this idea of having the high spot, the sunny, bright spot, that's a I think an important part of the story. And then probably my big part was that I think what's going to be important to telling the story is the narrative, and Bill did get into it, this idea of 10 versions or 10 proposals, and this being, you know, number 10, and how we got to where we are, you know, what was tried. I think that, you know, that we're not just throwing darts and, okay, here's another try at it. Things were kind of built, and this was tried and rejected. And I think, so that narrative, this is our 10th go at it, is a part of that story. So, thank you.
Commissioner Alkire. We can't hear you yet.
Thanks for the reminder. This is obviously pretty hard, otherwise it wouldn't have taken us 10 years and 10 tries to go after it. This one feels pretty good to me. I like the addition of the legit destination restaurant to build some buzz and excitement and a reason to go to the area. I'm still, you give a good rationale for why you need a bunch of parking spaces at the restaurant, because that's what restaurant operators need. But I guess I'd still like to hear more about other ways of thinking about it, kind of like what Commissioner Berube was referring to. Maybe we've exhausted all the options, maybe we haven't, but at that beautiful green space and then a surface parking lot, which doesn't really add much to the overall vibe of the place. But the restaurant certainly is a great addition. Senior co-op, there's some pluses and minuses, but it seems okay to me because it adds to the diversity with an ownership option in the area. Fits the demographic, helps aging Edina residents stay in Edina with an ownership option. The affordable housing units help, like Commissioner Berube. I'd like to see more, but there will of course be limits to that. The only concern I have about that is that, and I'd be interested at some point to hear the feedback from the residential, for the real estate community about how they think about this. I just wonder whether we've got too much 55 plus housing in the square mile that is the Grandview district. And I'm not saying we do, I'm just wondering about that because there's quite a lot of it already. Public space is great. We absolutely do need more green space in this area, and I can imagine 100 different programming options for that space. And the parking ramp, to me, is a big asset to the green space. Because if we have that green space without the parking ramp, there's only so many people who are going to bike to public events in the green space. And having it right next door, right across the bridge, I can easily see people parking the ramp, going across the bridge and down the steps to watch a movie in the park or some sort of musical performance or some other kind of event that's there in the spring and summer. But the bridge the bridge and the connection to the ramp is a big asset to the whole project. A couple things I'd like to hear more about as this proceeds is, one, I'd like to hear more about collaboration with the city on improving the pedestrian experience from the housing units to the library up that direction. How does that work? Is there a way to do that? Well, the library and the senior center, I guess, but the library was what came to mind first. Secondly, I'd like to hear more about parking on Acadia. We talked about that a little bit already tonight, but having on-street parking there, particularly on the west side of the street, will not improve the quality of that park. Quite the opposite. It will not improve the biking experience on Acadia. Quite the opposite. There just must be a better way to achieve traffic calming on that street. Achieving traffic calming with parked cars just doesn't seem like the best solution to me. I don't know what the right solution is. I'm not sure the road needs to be wider if you don't have parked cars on it, but I feel like we're missing the mark there. Lastly, and this is kind of a nit, but I'd like to hear more about, if we go through with this plan, we'll have a beautiful new restaurant, we'll have a beautiful new senior co-op, and a beautiful new park, and then we'll have the east wall of the parking ramp, which looks terrible. And it just is not going to have a very good aesthetic addition to the whole appeal of the property. So I know it's not the developer's job, it's probably the city's job, but what can we do to not have that be a blight on the whole visual experience of that area? So those are my comments. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Alkire. Commissioner Olson.
Yeah, I I like this plan. I like the green space and the amount that they're giving us, and the flexible space. I think there can be some exciting things that happen there. I like that it is connecting to the west with the pedestrian bridge. I understand again about the parking. I always like to see less, no surface parking if at all possible. So I guess look at that. But I understand that you do have to have the drive, for the service, for the access to the restaurant and the service areas. So I know you're going to have some, you know, car utility at that location, but maybe if there is a way to reduce and increase the green space, that would be great. So I'm looking over here because I'm looking at the plan as I'm talking. And then I do like the senior co-op. I know that we're kind of hoping to get a mix of housing or more affordable housing, but I think that I like this plan. I mean, it just seems kind of simple, and 10 years, and Bill and everyone has really, they've done their due diligence, and I believe you when you say this is really what's feasible. And I would like to see something happen on this site, and I'm kind of liking what I'm looking at. I guess if it does move forward, I would like to see again with the senior co-op or whatever housing is on that south side, to see how you're going to kind of activate the street with your access, or patios, or to Eden Avenue and Arcadia, and that's really all I've got right now. But I'm in support of you moving forward with this.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Commissioner Bennett.
Hey, how's it going? Good to see you guys again. No, thanks. I mean, it's good to see something happening here. I mean, something's better than nothing, I suppose. And what's tough for me is being so involved since the very foundation of this document. This was the reason I wanted to join the Planning Commission specifically. And so I live around this area, frequent it all the time. I continue to reference the framework as the starting block. So I see key components on this site that are there, that are good. The senior co-op is good. The restaurant is good. The green space is good. But we're still missing what the plan is very passionate about. And, I joined a community advisory team after the development of this framework, and we surveyed the community of what type of activities they'd like to be here. Most people did support some sort of use that was active and indoors, because to be honest, you have a green space 6 months a year, it's not going to be activated. So there was this idea of a community commons, and I'm not seeing it here. And I guess part of this proposal that I guess is disappointing me a little bit is, we are in the driver's seat here. Like, we own this property, and that's rare. So I feel like we should be very diligent about making sure we're doing everything that we set out to do. And if something's financially infeasible, I want to see the numbers. I want to see the due diligence that really tells me otherwise. And from like the public engagement side of between a year ago and now, to really understand like where we got, is you had to really attend HRA meetings, which, I tried to, and I still kind of saw this process, just some decisions made, but there wasn't adequate reasoning behind why other concepts weren't really explored and why we're not seeing those. And so when I see that north end of the site, there's a tremendous amount of opportunity. We talk about, overcoming the natural barriers of the site. I mean, we have a hole in the ground. That usually costs a lot of money to create. So if we're just filling it in with a bunch of soil, we're just losing out on something that could be. And if this plan goes forward, it'll be great. But what I'm telling you is it could be a lot better. We're not, at least from what I'm seeing in this plan too, we're not relying on that ramp as much as we could. And that goes to what other use you could provide into that north end that could then be supplemented by that ramp and that parking. It's one of the few times where we don't have to park the whole thing on site, and yet we have a minuscule green space and a restaurant with surface parking. We can do better than this. And so I just hope as this goes forward to the city council, if they didn't have adequate, information as to other options to support, like to really be open to considering something else that supplements the restaurant, connected to it, that complements it, whatever it could be. And if it does go forward, Commissioner Strauss hit on it, and so did Commissioner Elkhart. Arcadia really needs to be, again, if you reference page 18 of the framework, like that's the vision for Arcadia, this kind of very pedestrian oriented vibe where you could bike, you could walk, and cars are just slowly passing through. They're not parking, they're not staying, making it this outdoor like street room for the residents as well as the patrons nearby. So I think that's critical, not seeing that, and trying to get some more details into how the outdoor space, the outdoor plaza is activated. What type of features could be built in place now to supplement that. And with that, I will rest there. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Bennett. I agree with all of my fellow commissioners. I talked about the senior housing, last April. I understand wanting it to be ownership based. My mind goes through like where could there even be more creativity, right? Something like communal housing for a portion of it. That's a different angle on something that really does drive affordability. You see these really amazing examples online of communal housing for single mothers that allows them to live in different areas. And is this the absolute right place for that? I don't know. Maybe other areas of the town could be, but I just think creativity as we're addressing affordability within our community is important. I do really want you to, if it stays as is though, decouple the parking. I think that there's a lot of really good research on that supports how it drives to affordability in housing. And then I think also means that we're right sizing parking. And I understand that like all of this parking will be built, right? But you did mention that you would be selling units, 60% of the units or 40% of the units ahead of time. And so that could help in being an indicator too of how many units do you want for your parking? And then I really liked, I think it was Commissioner Berube talking about using then that extra parking that would be a part of that for the restaurant, because as much as we can eliminate that surface parking, I think the better. We talked about how Gesture Concepts is used to working in downtown where there is no parking dedicated. And I think that, being adaptive to this area, that's something that could be good. Understanding even that driveway needs to happen so you can still get the garbage collection, maybe even have along the parking ramp a couple of handicap stalls or something like that for accessibility could be good, but just bring in more of that green space because that's some prime area that's being used towards parking right now. I also am really concerned about like pedestrian safety, and I mean that along the streets primarily, but then even thinking about like going for pizza, meeting a friend for pizza, and then walking to my car that might be in the ramp. That's got to have a ton of lighting. And then I even think of like, I love trees. I'm like, this makes me nervous to say, but like the thinnest trees possible, because I'm imagining walking there alone. And if a tree is big enough that like someone could hide behind it, I would be nervous. So safety, I think, needs to be a critical component, because as much as we're trying to activate this area and have this be a destination, it's still going to be quiet at night, right? Like there's not many people at Starbucks at 10 p.m. So this is going to be a bulk of that evening time liveliness. I think what really resonated with what Commissioner Bennett was saying is what is it about this area that's going to bring the community together? I love the restaurant idea. Like I think it's going to be great. I think it could be great for this area. But even thinking of like the floral classes that I go to at the art center, or even as we're thinking about like this Cahill district area plan, and we're talking about like where are we going to be meeting to have our community meetings, or even just our working group meetings, we're talking about different locations. Like if there is even a third story on top of the restaurant, that could be more public space. Maybe it's flexible. Sometimes it's an art gallery. Maybe sometimes it's used for community meetings. I think there could be more. And I'm not going to be able to ideate every solution, nor could, Commissioner Bennett. But I think that's what we want to see is how can this be a destination that's bringing the community together? With that obviously comes like who's going to manage it. And so I think that's where we get into the complexity of would that be something that's owned and managed by the restaurant, or is this then a part of that park programming? And I live downtown when they did the Commons in front of the US Bank Stadium, and the programming that they have there is quite extensive. So like this needs to be something that is managed and curated. And so there just needs to be intentionality behind that. And then making sure that whatever it is that we're thinking about for this space can be accommodated in this space. I don't know if that means there needs to be something underneath. I'm not going to get into whether or not we fill it in. But I just really want to see something that's bringing the community together. And I think that's all that I had. And now Commissioner Bennett wants to throw cherry on top.
Yeah, just, I don't know, you kind of jogged some memory of mine, but, getting back to the beginning of what the community was longing for, and the whole framework spurred from the potential redevelopment of this site. Then they held back, developed a framework for the whole area. And why I keep harping on the community commons specifically is that's what the community decided on and wants. And there was full expectation that will cost money. There was never an expectation that, we're going to have to build something and bury the cost into the sale and the stuff of the, rest of the development. So again, we don't have to think we need to do this all for free. Like if we're going to create something that's state of the art and a way to bring people together, it doesn't have to cover the whole site, but it could be a use like you're talking about, or more active one. And the community knows that it's an easier sell to have a small levy, whatever. I mean, you have to pay for some of this, right? But filling a hole in the ground with dirt I'm a geotech engineer. Wow. I love that, but it is not the best use of this opportunity. So anyways, I just wanted to finish with that. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I know that was a lot to think about. Do you have any clarifying questions or anything, that wasn't? Now's the time to ask if there's anything to follow up. Okay.
Is that for me? I'm not sure who you're talking to.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh. Do I have questions for you? I don't think that's my place.
Well, any clarifying questions about any of the feedback that didn't make sense?
Well, I've been furiously taking notes. So as always, I have lines and lines and lines of comments. Some are consistent, some are conflicting, but it's super important that we hear from you. So the design team, most of them are still with us tonight. We will debrief. We go to the city council next week to hear their input as well. We met with the neighbors last week, and we met with the park board a couple weeks ago. So we'll take all that input and mix it up and see if there's something that can be workable here. So again, I sincerely appreciate your comments, your challenges, and your suggestions. And we'll do the best and see if we can actually get something done and time number 10.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming in and the dialogue. Okay. With that, we move on to chair and member comments. Any comments tonight? Commissioner Bennett.
Yeah, I guess mine kind of relates to, this particular proposal. I mean, that we're always looking for opportunities to, improve public engagement. And, there was a time for this specific project parcel where there was a proposal, there's an open house, there's a lot of public involvement. And it just felt lacking between a year ago and what we're seeing today. So I haven't witnessed many opportunities to improve, but this certainly seems like one. And, potentially it's just different because the HRA kind of held on to it mostly. But I mean, I haven't heard about this from any, residents or any fellow people that know my involvement with Grandview and my passion around it. So hearing nothing just suggests that, the public wasn't engaged as much as it could be to arrive at the conclusions of what we saw. So, and it kind of resonates in some other projects. I think we do a better job with Better Together, but maybe advertising it earlier, providing opportunities to get involved with something that, again, we own this parcel. It should be more engaged than other projects. So I don't know if anyone else got that vibe, but I certainly did.
That made me think, Commissioner Bennett. I'm currently going through a public policy fellows program at the Humphrey School, and as a part of that, have a final capstone project. And there were a lot of different ideas thrown around, and I proposed parking as a topic, and I couldn't get a group of students of peers, of fellows of mine to be excited about that. But the project that I ended up on, I am actually really excited about, is about community engagement. And it's about thinking about the ways that entities in general, but targeting specifically with the lens of government entities, how are cities communicating with constituents? How are they engaging constituents? And the research that I've done as a part of that, tells me that Edina is doing a pretty good job comparatively. I think that they, in my research, are kind of leaders in the framework, in the way that they think about it. But it's also that, and the reason that this is a project that we're doing at the Humphrey School is because there's no silver bullet and no one solved it, and there's no perfect blueprint for how to do community engagement. And so I think that I like your call to action, Jimmy, and I think that that's something that we all need to be continually mindful of and intentional with. And I'm hoping that I come out of this, capstone project with some really great ideas that I can bring back to, the city of Edina, but also to the Planning Commission here, because there's always area for improvement, but I don't have the answers yet. So that was just maybe a preview of something that I hope to be able to contribute back to our group. Any other chair member comments? We don't have Lou tonight to close us out with something. All right, then we will go to staff comments.
Yeah, just quickly, and to follow up on that last conversation. So with all sketch plans that come to the planning department, we do post them on the website. So it's been posted since, it looks like January 12th. And that's a relatively new process. Initially, we didn't post sketch plans on Better Together. We started doing that, it was probably a couple of years ago. But for what that's worth, it's been on the website for a couple of weeks. Just to follow up on a couple of city council final decisions that were made at their last meeting. The subdivision that you all approved on January December 30th at the special meeting. They did approve that. And also the ordinance amendment regarding the 1 foot rule, impervious surface, basements, and the definition clarifications. That was approved also. There was some more just clerical, nothing substantive that they edited. So essentially passed as recommended by the Planning Commission. And that is it for me.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, then I will look for a motion to adjourn for tonight.
Move to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Liz, can we do a roll call?
Commissioner Strauss.
Aye.
Commissioner Olson.
Aye.
Commissioner Berube.
Aye.
Commissioner Elkhire.
Aye.
Commissioner Bennett.
Aye.
Chair Agnew.
Aye. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Good night, everybody.